What's up guys, Paladin here, and today I'm coming at you with my first pre-patch guide for Red Paladin. I guess technically this is my second because I did a small guide on bursting on the PTR, but it's going to be a little bit updated now, and we're going to go through everything that someone returning to 9.0 would need to know if they kind of skipped out on BFA. Alright, the first thing that we will get into is the ret stat priority. It's nice and simple. We go for as much versatility as possible, followed by an equal amount of haste and mastery. As you can see right here, my haste and mastery are not the same values, but they are both the equal in stat value in terms of doing damage in PvP. And lastly is crit. Now crit is now unnerfed in PvP as of 9.0, so we can do fat crits. So crit is not as bad as it used to be. So if you have a gear with something like burst crit, it's not the end of the world. But aim for as much verse mastery and verse haste pieces as you can get. Another piece to know in terms of gearing is you're going to now need a PvP trinket. You can get this from either the BOA vendor in Ironforge, or you can buy one from the PvP vendors in Stolman and Orgrimmar, or in Borealis or Mogambala. And the Stolman PvP vendor is right over here. You can buy very low item level honor gear, but it's all here. The entire set pieces, they're item level 68. It's unreasonably low if you ask me, but we're not here to talk about the honor gear. We're here to talk about ret pallies. So after that, let's go over the talents. So ret talents, you have an extraordinary amount of viable talents this time. It's no longer just purely cookie cutter, even though you will be likely running one build over the rest. This right here is my default rated PvP build. Now this includes Conflict and Strife as a major essence, but we'll go over that a little bit later. I'm going to be taking Execution Sentence, Blade of Wrath, Fist of Justice, Cavalier, or Unbreakable Spirit, one of these two. Seraphim or Holy Avenger, one of these two. And Healing Hands or Selfless Healer, one of these two. As I said, we have some variants, and then always Final Reckoning. Now, the reason I take Execution Sentence in rated PvP is simple. It's a very, very strong burst mechanic that allows ret to make up for its not super insignificant consistent damage, but it gives us more frequent access to burst, so we're killing people in 1 minute cooldown windows rather than waiting every 2 minutes for Avenging Wrath. Blade of Wrath is just simply the best holy power generating talent on this tier. Fires of Justice is really weak. Imperium Power is also really weak because it's tied to Crusader Strike. However, due to Azerite essences, we actually have access to this talent without actually talenting it. Fist of Justice is a little more beneficial than these other rows here, but again, in rated PvP, you can run both of these. They're very situational, but default PvP, Fist of Justice. Now for our next tier, I always default into Cavalier because I find myself needing the extra mobility quite frequently. And due to ret's self-sustainability with Word of Glory returning, we don't need to always, have a super short cooldown on Bubble. Plus, games are super fast now, and Cavalier is just overtaking Unbreakable Spirit, in my opinion. Next, we have the level 40 row, and in my opinion, it's between Seraphim or Holy Avenger. Now, if you are in a 3s game, I would almost always go Seraphim, but if you're in a 2s game and you are playing double DPS against double DPS, Holy Avenger is very, very good in terms of sustained healing. It's a strong defensive cooldown when paired with Healing Hands because you can Word of Glory every other global cooldown. But Seraphim allows you to burst so much harder with Execution Sentence. It's absolutely insane. Now, Healing Hands is something that is new to this row in 9.0. It's buffing our Word of Glory by up to 100% based on targets missing health, but in PvP it's actually nerfed to up to 70% as of this past week. So it's not as strong as it used to be. And they did buff baseline Word of Glory slightly. So I've actually been running Selfless Healer quite a few games, and the healing difference on Word of Glory between Healing Hands and Selfless Healer is kind of negligible. I've noticed I've been able to get a lot more value out of Selfless Healer, but you can actually run either one of these talents and just be fine. Just because Vengeance is something that really needs to be taken out of the game, there's no point. It does less damage than a Templar's Verdict, significantly less damage for a higher cost, and it does significantly less healing than a Word of Glory for a higher cost, so there's really no reason for this to be in the game anymore. And on the final tier of talents, we have the level 50 row. Final Reckoning is the way to go. Now, the way this talent works is when you drop it on the ground, just like that, you buff you buff your Holy Power Spender abilities that hit it with this debuff Final Reckoning by 50%, you are going to always want to use a Final Reckoning before you use an Execution Sentence. I've done plenty of testing to see which does more damage, and it always turns out the 50% bonus is better than adding the damage from Final Reckoning to Execution Sentence during the Execution Sentence window. The other talents here, they're not terrible. I could see Crusade being possibly used when we have higher levels of haste inside Shadowlands, but until then, it's not going to be super great, especially with how well Final Reckoning is working right now. And let me just explain the passive real quick. So when this ability is ready to use, so we'll have it available in about 10 seconds here, your attacks have a high chance of proccing about 400 to 600 damage. It says 412 on the tooltip, but mine usually does around 400 to 600 damage, and increasing your Holy Power Spender abilities by 10%. So it's just like a minor extra judgment. And that passive ability, let's see, looks like that. It's a Reckoning stack. 10% increased Holy Power damage on your next Templar's Verdict, Execution Sentence, or Divine Storm. So it increases both your consistent and your burst damage. And then Sanctified Wrath we don't really need right now, because if you're running the proper Azerite setup, you are already going to have a Light's Decree, which gives you the 5 extra seconds on Avenging Wrath. Alright, speaking of neck and Azerite and all that stuff, traits, let's get into the neck traits. So if you're just returning to WoW, 2 of the easiest traits to get, actually 3 of the easiest traits to get are these 3 right here. So you'll be able to get almost all of them within 1 week or less. 2 of them you'll be able to get in a single day. So Conflict and Strife Major is what I will be running almost all times in PvP because of the access to Unbound Freedom. And I'll explain why that's better than using the Vision of Perfection that we used to use in PvP. Followed by Crucible Flame Rank 3. This is a trait that someone can get if you just hit max level. You can get this in a single day. Just following the 8.2, 8.3 quest line. You'll unlock the level 60 neck piece doing that, and you'll be able to complete the quests to get the rank 3. It should take you about half hour or less, depending on how quick you are at questing. And then you can get rank 1 of Breath of the Dying really quickly, and this is really all you need because the extra damage from Breath of the Dying is great in PvP. And then your last trait, I like Memory of Lucid Dreams because it functions like an extra Divine Purpose proc. You have access to just more holy power with this ability. But this is typically the setup I will run in PvP. Now in PvE, the only traits that you really toss out in exchange are Conflict and Strife for Vision of Perfection if you have it. But if you don't have it, don't really worry about it. These are all going to be going away in hopefully 4 to 6 weeks. Now let's go over the Azerite traits themselves in your gear. So you are going to want Avenger's Might times 3. So 1 Avenger's Might per piece for the maximum mastery in your burst, followed by at least 1 Empyrean Power, and then 1 Light's Decree. So those are your 5 most important traits. And then the 6th trait, which for me is Expurgation, it's not that good, but ideally you would want something like maybe Relentless Inquisitor or Indomitable Justice. It really doesn't matter. It's not a huge deal what your last trait is. It could even be something like Bloodright for the haste. Yeah, that's about it for the Azerite and neck pieces. What's next here? We got PvP talents. Okay, so PvP talents have changed a little bit for Ret Paladins. Now, the reason I'm running this setup right here is because I have access to Unbound Freedom in my neck piece with Conflict and Strife. It makes it baseline. But right now, Unbound Freedom takes Freedom off the global cooldown, which is really good. As you can see right there, press Freedom, it did not trigger GCD. So it's almost mandatory to have Unbound Freedom. So when we are not running Conflict and Strife Major, you need to exchange 1 of these to get rid of that and give yourself access to Unbound Freedom. But right now, this is typically what I'm running in PvP. Law and Order for the slow. I run Ore of Reckoning because it has no internal global cooldown, or no internal cooldown, so you can proc these in a battleground or a 3v3 game, like almost back to back to back. It's proccing even more than Vision of Perfection right now, which is absolutely crazy. And then I'm running Lawbringer for the slightly increased consistent damage. And in Shadowlands itself, this is even stronger when you run Kyrian, but that's a whole nother video we'll go over on my beta review of Ret Paladin. Now, yeah, that's about it for the talents and the neck traits. Let's get into the burst rotation of macros. Alright, so let's do the rotations real quick. So in PvP, rotations are more of a priority system rather than a linear progression system. you're going to want to prioritize your Blade of Justice over your Judgment, and then your last priority is Crusader Strike, all while never going over 5 Holy Power. Now, as long as you don't cap or exceed the cap of your 5 Holy Power and you're spending your Templars while following the priority of Blade of Justice over Judgment over Crusader Strike, that is more or less your consistent damage burst rotation. Now, the actual burst rotation is requiring some setup now. It's not just pop wings and hit some Templar's Verdicts. It's more of a setup. So you have to get a normal Reckoning stack on the target, followed by a Judgment, and then you need Seraphim before you press your Wings Final Reckoning into an Execution Sentence while you have a Judgment on the target, and as Judgment is about to come off cooldown, you re-Judgment into a Wake of Ashes, into a Templar's Verdict, and I'm just going to show you guys what that looks like real quick. So we're going to build up to 5 Holy Power right here. We Blade of Justice into Judgment into Double Crusader. We're going to wait just 1 second to get the Reckoning, so you have Judgment and Reckoning, and now we're going to Seraphim into Wings, into Final Reckoning, into a Blade of Justice, into a Execution Census, into another Judgment, into a Wake of Ashes, into a Templar's Verdict, into a Blade of Justice, into a Templar's Verdict, into an Empyrean Power, and yeah, that's about it. We hit a 38k Execution Sentence, and that is your burst rotation. So it's definitely much different than what it used to be for BFA and even Legion, where you just pop wings and you slap a few Templar's Verdicts, a few big Judgments. It requires some thought, and definitely a lot of multipliers in there now. So that's the way a lot of classes are going. Sub-Rogue and Frost Mage are the exact same. So we have the damage bonus from Seraphim in the Versatility and Mastery. We have the damage bonus from both Reckoning and Final Reckoning within this talent. We have the damage bonus from Judgment, the 25% increased damage on your next Holy Power ability. We have the damage increase from Avenging Wrath, the 20% increase for 25 seconds. And then we have the increase to Execution Sentence itself on that 20% of your damage will go into the final part of the Execution Sentence during the execution window. Now, what you need to keep in mind with your bursting is that Final Reckoning needs to be used before Execution Sentence. So this needs to be on the target. Otherwise, your Execution Sentence will not benefit from Final Reckoning. For example, you can't, like, let me generate 3 Holy Power right here and then use Execution Sentence and Final Reckoning over it. It will not benefit from the 50% increased damage to Execution Sentence, but it will benefit from the damage of the initial tick of Final Reckoning. But I've done plenty of testing, and in almost all scenarios that I can think of, you benefit more from doing Final Reckoning into Execution Sentence. All right, that's about it for the damage guide. Let's get into the macros. All right, so let's go over the macros. Honestly, not too much has changed between BFA and Shadowlands. We just had to add a couple more macros for the new abilities that we received. Let's open it up here. All right, I'll go over what I use. Primarily, I have mouseover macros for most of my utility, my healing. This is my Blessing of Protection macro. Basically, if you just mouse over someone or their party frame, it will use Blessing of Protection on them. And if you are having your mouse on terrain or a enemy player or target, it will use it on yourself. Here's my burst macro. It just has my wings, my Gladiator's badge, and my Saltwater Potion for battlegrounds. I have a cancelaura button, which I have keybound over here to middle mouse. Just will cancel freedom or protection, so a mage can't spell steal it. If you're not running Unbound Freedom, or if you're running with a Holy Paladin and he's going to bop you or something, you need to cancel it. I have my Cleanse macro, which is the same exact setup as Blessing of Protection. So if I'm just chilling here, I'm targeting an enemy or someone, the terrain, I will use the Cleanse on myself. But if I have my my mouse over either the frame or the player, it will go ahead and cleanse them like that. I have a new macro for Final Reckoning. This is just the same macro that I use for my Hunter for traps. It is just a cursor macro for Final Reckoning, so I mouse over right here. Instead of getting the green targeting icon, you just cast it where your mouse is. I use my Freedom macro, which is the same setup. You'll see a repeating pattern. This is the same setup as Dispel, Bop, and Word of Glory. So if I just mouse over this dude right here, what's your name? We'll give it to the Dragon Slayer. Just double freedom. Don't have to have them targeted. Just mouse over them. Word of Glory, same exact setup. We have an older style macro for freedom. You could do party targets for freedoms for bops with this line right here. You just have to do party 1, 2, 3. Basically, I don't use these style macros anymore because I now prefer the mouseover style because I like to use it in both battlegrounds and arenas. But if you're purely doing arenas, you can go ahead and use the party 1, 2, 3 like I used to. Here is my focus modifier for Hammer of Justice. So let's go ahead and set this PvP dummy to focus, and then we'll target this guy right here. And with my same keybind for our Hammer of Justice, if I hold down Hodge, it will just, hodge the off target. Let's clear this focus. I have that same setup for Rebuke right here. And slow, so slow and rebuke, same setup. Again, these macros will be in the description if anyone needs to copy paste. And then the same exact setup for Hand of Sacrifice. Big repeating pattern here. This is the same macro I use for all of my utility. It just make sure you guys erase my name in the macro and put in your own name, because it's not going to work for you unless you put in your own character name when you're typing the @ sign, and then it's Levladen right there. Change Levladen to your name, whatever your character's name is. All right, let's see. Anything else that's really important? Not really. We have some Blessing of Sanctuary macros. I do still use the target for Sanctuary because, that split second difference does sometimes come in handy with Sanctuary, I find. And I don't really run Sanctuary in Battlegrounds, so this is more of an arena macro. But yeah, that's about it. All right, guys, I hope you guys found this guide enjoyable, helpful. Anyone returning to the game, welcome back to Shadowlands. It so far is much better than PFA in my opinion. It is just the pre-patch. I'm really enjoying it. Be sure to follow me on Twitch. I now stream a handful of times a week, trying for at least 3 to 4 times. I just earned a sub button, so it's giving me even more motivation to start streaming over there. But be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I'll see you all next video. Peace.